What if the place linked to Noah's Ark for decades has just revealed something buried beneath it that scientists can't easily explain? At the Durupinar Formation in eastern Turkey, researchers are examining scans and excavation evidence that appear to reveal unusual shapes deep beneath the surface. And now, something has emerged roughly 8 feet down that is reigniting one of history's most controversial mysteries. If these findings turn out to be connected to an ancient vessel, the implications could be enormous. Genesis describes Noah's Ark coming to rest in the mountains of Ararat, but for generations, skeptics have argued there was simply no physical evidence worth taking seriously. Now, researchers say the patterns beneath the formation deserve a much closer look, and that's where this story gets fascinating. Some of the detected shapes appear surprisingly structured rather than random. Could they be geological formations created naturally over thousands of years? Or could they preserve traces of something deliberately constructed? Like and subscribe, because what comes next could completely change how we see this ancient mystery. For believers, this could become extraordinary evidence. For skeptics, it's another claim demanding hard proof. But one thing is certain: the mystery surrounding Durupinar isn't disappearing. It's getting deeper, and whatever is buried beneath that strange formation may hold the clue. Far from any city tucked into the harsh volcanic slopes of Mount Tenderek in eastern Turkey, the land carries a scar that has refused to disappear. Seen from above, the formation looks almost too perfect to be accidental, a long, smooth oval more than 500 feet from end to end, sunk into the earth as if something massive had settled there and the ground had slowly closed over it. Locals have pointed at it for centuries. Their grandparents pointed at it. Their grandparents' grandparents pointed at it. The shape has been there as long as memory. The site has a name now: Durupinar. The dimensions are remarkably close to a length, recorded in an ancient text, though we will get to which text and why that comparison matters later. For decades, the shape was all anyone had, a coincidence, a hunch. Early visitors in the 1960s measured the terrain, took photographs, and walked away, calling it a geological curiosity, interesting but natural. Case closed, or so the experts believed. The case did not stay closed. It refused to. The shape kept appearing in aerial surveys, decade after decade. Hikers kept stumbling onto it. Local farmers kept telling the same stories their grandfathers had told them. And every few years, a new researcher would arrive, take one look at the impossibly clean outline, and ask the question that had been asked for generations: what in the world is a ship-shaped formation doing 7,000 feet up a volcanic mountain? The official answer was always erosion. The unofficial answer was always something else entirely. The long hunt for Noah's Ark takes a sudden turn when a 4,000-year-old clay tablet is discovered in the attic of a British Air Force veteran. The team that brought the tools, what separates the current investigation from every previous chapter in this story, is a simple shift in approach. Modern researchers stopped chasing rumors and started running scans. The team, led by Dr. Andrew Jones, arrived at Durupinar not with shovels and rope, but with ground-penetrating radar, three-dimensional subsurface imaging, and instruments capable of reading rock layers the way a doctor reads an X-ray. Jones had walked into this expecting to debunk it. That is the honest version of how most serious investigators approach a site like this. You assume the formation is natural, set up your equipment to confirm what geology tells you it should be, and publish the results. Volcanic terrain produces chaos, broken stone, random layering. crumpled rock pushed around by ancient earthquakes. The team set up their equipment, expecting noise. What came back on the screens was the opposite of noise. Jones watched as the scans began revealing long, continuous straight lines running underground. They showed sharp 90-degree angles. They showed what appeared to be layered sections stacked in tiers, almost like floors of a structure. They showed symmetrical compartments laid out with a regularity that does not occur naturally. Erosion is many things, but it is not symmetrical. Volcanic rock can do many tricks, but it does not build right angles in repeating patterns 8 to 20 feet beneath the surface. Jones reportedly leaned closer to the screen the first time the layered tiers resolved, then went quiet for a long time. Quiet, in his line of work, is what loud sounds like. The formation was not behaving like rock. The formation was behaving like a structure. And then came the numbers. When the team measured the underground patterns and compared them against the dimensions written in the Book of Genesis thousands of years ago, 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, the proportions lined up far closer than chance would allow. Not identical to the millimeter, but close enough that the room went quiet, close enough that the lead investigator stopped joking about Indiana Jones and started double-checking their equipment. The internal compartments mapped by the radar appeared to repeat at intervals, matching ratios described in the original text, ratios nobody had been thinking about until the data forced the comparison. It was the kind of correlation scientists hate because it strips away the comfort of dismissal. What the ground remembered. The next day, Jones and his colleagues turned their attention to the soil. If the radar was telling the truth, the chemistry should back it up. If the radar was wrong, the dirt would expose it. Soil samples taken from inside the formation came back unlike anything found in the surrounding terrain. It takes many years to translate, but some believe it could finally solve the mystery of where the Bible's great flood took place and where the ark itself landed. The chemistry was wrong, or rather it was right in a way that should not have been possible. Inside the outline, the dirt held significantly more organic content than the soil just a few yards outside it. Organic content is a polite scientific way of saying remnants of once living material, the kind of trace you find when wood, fiber, or biological matter has slowly broken down over thousands of years and left its fingerprint in the chemistry of the earth. Mineral concentrations were also off. Iron levels showed unusual streaking patterns. Even the vegetation growing directly above the formation looked subtly different from the plants in the neighboring soil, slightly stunted, slightly altered, as if the roots were drawing from a layer that was not entirely natural. Aerial photographs taken across different seasons reveal that the outline appears more clearly during certain months, as if the underground structure influences the way snow melts and grass grows on the surface above it. Farmers nearby have reported for generations that crops planted directly on the oval do not thrive the way crops do 30 feet to either side. Animals graze around it more often than across it. It was as if the ground itself remembered something buried, something organic, something shaped. Jones, by all accounts, did not celebrate. He requested duplicate samples. He sent material to additional laboratories. He compared his readings against control samples taken from terrain 100 yards away. The chemistry refused to flatten out. Every test came back with the same answer. The dirt inside that outline was not the same as the dirt around it. Something had been there, something organic, something large. Then there were the stones surrounding the site, scattered across the nearby villages, massive standing stones with holes carved through their upper sections. Locals have always called them anchor stones. The theory passed down through generations is that these monoliths were once tied to something massive to keep it stable in violent currents. Some tower higher than a man. None of the families nearby know who carved them or when. The standard answer is the same one every visiting researcher hears. They have always been here. The stones appear in clusters, often near streams or low valleys, oriented in ways that suggest deliberate placement rather than natural distribution. Some bear faint markings that have never been fully translated. Skeptics argue they are repurposed gravestones from later medieval periods. Others insist no medieval mason would carve through stone that thick just to mark a burial. You can dismiss any one of these clues. A shape can be a coincidence. Soil chemistry can be explained. Standing stones can be repurposed monuments. But the clues do not exist in isolation. They sit on top of one another, layer after layer, each one strange in its own right and impossible to fully explain when stacked together. What the cameras found below. After the scans, after the soil tests, after the pattern of evidence had become impossible to ignore, the team made the decision to go deeper. Jones authorized targeted boreholes into the most promising zones identified by the radar and lowered specialized cameras designed to navigate narrow underground spaces. The expectation was darkness, dirt, maybe a void, maybe nothing at all. What the cameras captured sparked the headlines that swept around the world. Inside the shadowed pockets beneath the formation, the footage revealed structured patterns, cavities with sharp edges, repeating geometries, and clear divisions that suggested separations between distinct internal spaces, almost like rooms or compartments. The walls of these voids did not look like the inside of a cave. They looked like the inside of something built and then buried. In some frames, the lens picked up faint horizontal lines running along what might have been ceiling timbers, lines too straight to be erosion and too uniform to be random fracture. In other frames, the cavity walls showed traces of compressed organic material, the kind of dark, fibrous residue wood leaves behind when slowly absorbed into surrounding sediment over thousands of years. Jones watched the live feed in a temporary field tent set up at the edge of the site. The first time the camera cleared the borehole and the cavity opened up on screen, he reportedly said nothing for almost a minute. Then he asked the operator to hold position, capture stills, and pan slowly. Every member of the team in that tent understood what they were looking at without needing to be told. Whatever the official report would eventually say, the room knew. The researchers refused to declare victory. No triumphant press conferences, no banner headlines with the word confirmed. Their statements remained careful, measured, almost frustratingly cautious. More drilling was needed, more scanning, more testing, independent verification, peer review, the slow, grinding machinery of real science. But the words they did use carried weight. Phrases like consistent with a man-made structure, phrases like cannot be explained by natural geology alone. Phrases that, in the language of academic science, are practically shouting, something is down there, something structured, something that should not exist beneath a remote volcanic ridge in eastern Turkey. The man who found it first. To understand why the current findings are landing the way they are, it helps to understand the man who has haunted this site for 50 years. His name was Ron Wyatt. He was a nurse from Tennessee. He was not an archaeologist. He had no formal training in geology, history, or biblical scholarship. By every academic standard, He had no business chasing what he chased. It started with a magazine. In the late 1970s, Wyatt came across a photograph in Life magazine showing the strange boat-shaped outline in the mountains of eastern Turkey. Most readers would have flipped the page. Wyatt could not look away. He became convinced, almost overnight, that the shape in the photograph was the petrified remains of Noah's Ark. From that moment, his life had a single direction. For more than 2 decades, he traveled back and forth between the United States and Turkey like a man who had received an assignment he could not refuse. He photographed every angle of the formation. He collected samples. He measured. He pointed to ridges and called them ribs, streaks in the soil and called them iron fasteners, standing stones and called them anchors. To his supporters, he was God's archaeologist. To his critics, he was a sincere amateur, reading scripture into rocks. Wyatt's claims grew bolder over the years, expanding into other relics and other sites. Mainstream archaeologists rolled their eyes. His methods were undisciplined. His documentation was inconsistent. He often relied on intuition, where peer-reviewed science demanded measurement. The academic world wrote him off, and by most accounts, they had every reason to. And yet, many of the specific features he pointed to at Durupinar 50 years ago, the symmetrical outline, the unusual soil, the underground patterns, the anchor stones, are precisely the features that modern scanning technology is now mapping in detail. He was wrong about a great deal. He may have been right about the shape in the dirt. The man without credentials, without instruments, without peer review, may have been staring at the right square of ground the whole time. And the experts who dismissed him for half a century are the ones now pulling cameras out of boreholes, wondering how to phrase what they have just seen, why every age hunted this ship. The hunt did not begin with Wyatt, and it will not end with the current team. The search for Noah's Ark stretches back almost as far as the story itself. In the 1st century, the Jewish historian Flavius Josephus wrote with confidence that fragments of the Ark could be found in the mountains of Armenia, in the same range later identified as Ararat in modern Turkey. He was not alone. Early Christian writers, medieval scholars, and Islamic geographers all reference the Ark as a real object resting somewhere high in the eastern mountains. They did not consider it metaphor. To them, it was geography. The story itself is not unique to one tradition. Versions of a great flood appear in roughly 200 cultures around the world. A Babylonian tablet, examined by researchers at the British Museum, describes a massive, circular vessel with precise dimensions. A replica, built in modern times, actually floated successfully when tested in water. Aboriginal traditions in Australia describe ancient floodwaters that reshaped the continent, surviving as oral memory across thousands of years. 2 cultures separated by oceans, 2 flood vessels, 1 pattern. Throughout the Middle Ages, travelers brought back tales of wooden beams, glimpsed in the high passes. Shepherds spoke of dark shapes emerging from the ice during warm summers. Glaciers, the keepers of frozen secrets, occasionally retreated just enough to reveal something that looked suspiciously like timber. These reports were unverifiable. They were also persistent. The First World War added a strange new chapter. Pilots flying reconnaissance missions over the Ararat region reported seeing a massive ship-shaped structure protruding from a melting ice shelf. Soldiers stationed in the area swore they had spotted it too. The war made return visits impossible. By the time the dust settled, the ice had moved. The mountain had hidden whatever it had briefly shown, and the sightings became legends. A Russian Air Corps mission was reportedly dispatched to investigate, only to vanish from the historical record after the Bolshevik Revolution. Whatever those pilots saw, whatever those soldiers believed, never made it to a peer-reviewed journal. By the early 20th century, Mount Ararat had become more than a mountain. It had become a destination for explorers, climbers, and dreamers, convinced that the ship of Noah lay frozen somewhere on its slopes. In 1876, a researcher named James Bryce climbed high above the tree line and returned with a hand-cut piece of wood. He admitted there could be a mundane explanation. He did not look very hard for one. Throughout the early 1900s, expedition after expedition mounted the slopes of Ararat, each promising to be the one that brought back proof. Each came back with stories. None came back with a ship. And the longer the silence stretched, the more it began to feel like something was being kept hidden, not by the mountain, but by something else. The Cold War's Ark fever. The mythology took an unexpected turn during the Cold War. Rumors began to circulate that classified American satellite imagery had captured a ship-like anomaly high on Ararat's icy slopes. Tabloids ran wild. Religious newsletters reported that the Central Intelligence Agency was sitting on photographic proof. Movie studios optioned the story. When public versions of those satellite images were eventually released and analyzed, the excitement deflated quickly. What had looked like a hull turned out to be shadow, jagged rock, and glacial striation viewed from space. Mountains play tricks on cameras, especially when the people behind the cameras desperately want to see a ship. Then, in 1959, a Turkish army cartographer named Captain İlhan Durupinar, while reviewing aerial mapping photographs of the region, noticed a long, smooth, elongated shape sitting on a gentle slope far south of Ararat's summit. It was strangely symmetrical. It looked, for lack of a better word, like the outline of a ship pressed into the earth. The site, eventually named after him, became the new center of gravity for the search, not on the icy peak, not buried in glaciers, but sitting in plain sight on a mudflow-covered terrace, half visible from the road, hiding in the open. Early teams in the 1960s dismissed it as a natural geological formation, the result of mud, lava, and water sculpting the landscape into something accidentally boat-shaped. They were not wrong to be cautious, but they were working with the tools of their decade. And the formation, as the next generation of instruments would eventually reveal, had been waiting for the right tools to arrive. The question was no longer whether something was hidden in plain sight. The question was what would happen the day someone finally looked at it the right way. From eyewitness to evidence, every previous chapter in the search for Noah's Ark has shared one fatal weakness. It relied on the human eye, on photographs, on memory, on the testimony of people who wanted to see what they were looking for. Pilots in the mist, shepherds in the snow, climbers in the thin air. Their reports were sincere and almost impossible to verify. What makes the current investigation different is that the eye has been replaced by the instrument. Radar does not get tired. Radar does not see what it expects to see. Radar bounces signals off what is actually there and reports the geometry. Soil chemistry does not lie about its mineral content. Cameras lowered into boreholes do not embellish what they capture. The new generation of evidence at Durupinar is built on data, not stories, and the data keeps pointing in the same uncomfortable direction. Computer modeling now allows researchers to reconstruct the underground formation in 3 dimensions, slicing through it virtually, layer by layer, comparing it to known geological patterns and known man-made structures. The computer keeps placing it closer to the second category than the first. There is something underground. It is not random, it is not natural, and it is not small. Whether that something is the literal ark described in Genesis remains an open question. Whether it is another ancient structure entirely, a lost civilization, a ceremonial site, or something the historical record has forgotten, is also possible. The team has been careful not to overpromise, but the days of dismissing the formation as a coincidence of erosion are over. The data does not allow that conclusion anymore. For centuries, anyone claiming Noah's Ark might be real was expected to prove it. They were called dreamers, forced to climb the mountain and defend the idea against skeptics who thought the question was already settled. But recent scanning at Durupinar has shifted the pressure. Scientists who argue the formation is completely natural now have to explain the unusual underground patterns. The symmetry, apparent right angles, and increasingly detailed scans are making simple erosion theories harder to defend. That doesn't prove the Ark has been found, but it does mean the mystery can no longer be dismissed so easily. And now, drilling, soil samples, carbon dating, independent scans, and international research teams could finally provide the evidence needed to settle the question.